Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healer specialise in websites for counsellors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counsellors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm exceptionally well. Thanks for asking, Rory. Rory and I are both excited to be here. This is the Counselling Tutor Podcast, and you've joined us at episode 280. 3 stops on today's journey, starting off with student services, where we recognise the student journey. And today we're going to be speaking about something that I think applies to all, and that is overcoming imposter syndrome. I guess we've all felt it at some level, at some time in our lives. We then move into ethical, sustainable practice. This is where we recognise counsellors in private practice, leveraging a private practice. Perhaps there are skills called upon us that we don't study in our core training. And today we're going to be speaking about a really important part of private practice, and it's about a hidden third person in the room. And you might think to yourself, listening to this, I never have anybody else in my room, so I'm okay. You may be surprised. Listen into this one. It's got a bit of a catch to it. And then thirdly, we go into the CPD section of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Don't forget to pop it on your CPD tracker. You can claim your CPD for this. And today in ethical sustainable practice, in practice matters, we are speaking with Lisa Mathurin on her lecture that she gave in the counselling study resource for our student counsellors on transactional analysis. So a packed episode, Rory.
Absolutely, Ken. Absolutely. And I guess we start with student services and overcoming imposter syndrome. Yes, and if you're listening to this and you may be doing your skills, you may be a student doing a certificate or an introduction to counselling, or maybe you're someone who's just in the first throes of being a student therapist working with clients, just started your placement, or you may even be someone who's been practicing for a long time, I guess. Do you kind of think you're an imposter? Do you think that, at any moment you're going to get caught and someone's going to point you out and say, you're not a real counsellor, you're just playing at it? And if that's you, and as we'll look at as we go through this idea, there's more people out there, I think, than just you. And it's called imposter syndrome. It's a well-known psychological process where people believe that effectively they're imposters. They shouldn't really be doing, in this case, counselling or counselling skills. And as I said, at any time someone may turn up and say, well, I don't think you're doing a very good job, and you shouldn't really be doing it. And I think it affects more people than we give credit for. I know that as kind of myself taught for a number of years, and it was surprising the number of students that took us to one side and said, I'm not sure I'm good enough, or I'm not sure I'm cut out to be a therapist. When clearly we've observed them and they were brilliant at it. They had all the ingredients to make a really good therapist. But it seems to be a bit of a thing, Ken.
It is, yeah. And what's interesting is often talked about, and I hear it certainly outside of our counselling bubble. I hear it in a lot of different elements and aspects of my life. I hear it in my hobbies even. I will hear people that share the same hobby feeling and sharing the words imposter syndrome. It seems like we know the words imposter syndrome, but I wonder if we understand that it is actually backed up by theory. This has been studied, data has been collected, and there are published papers around imposter syndrome, what it is. And I think we start maybe with a definition of imposter syndrome. And I hope I'm pronouncing these names right. It's Collingen and Sternberg from 1991. And we are quoting here a quote of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome describes high achieving individuals who, despite their objective success, fail to internalize their accomplishments and have persistent self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud or imposter. And it's interesting because I can definitely key in and understand that feeling even within self, and I can share here openly, plainly and congruently, Rory, just in this last week in one of my, personal development groups, I went in sharing that I felt imposter syndrome in my job in Counselling Tutor. And I can share it there because it's a safe environment. I kind of know the mechanisms and I know what I need to do to kind of get past that. But speaking it out loud for me is that first step. And of course, there are risks around imposter syndrome. And this again comes from the handout, and we'll direct you to that in a moment. And it kind of overviews who might, or different flavors of imposter syndrome, who might feel imposter syndrome and why. And it speaks about a number of different, let's call them kind of avatars or personas or people types. And it starts off with the expert who feels satisfied only if they feel that they know everything. And that they can kind of feel that they're overreaching before starting a task. So imposter syndrome can kind of hold somebody prisoner, as it were, as they feel that they need to gather more and more and more evidence to be able to do this task or this job correctly. And that is kind of described as the expert. Then there is the perfectionist, and it's certainly something I recognize within myself, that perfectionist tendency. And the perfectionists set themselves perhaps impossibly high goals and focus on weaknesses rather than strengths. Never good enough. And I know from having artist friends, they'll paint a piece of work and they'll put it up and I'll look at it and go, wow, that is incredible. They'll go, oh yeah, but I could have spent another 6 hours on that. That's the perfectionist side. It's just never good enough, despite how much effort and how much of self might be poured into that. And then there is a persona type known as the natural genius. And this is someone who's really accustomed to being really capable in a wide range of tasks and things that they face on a daily basis. But they can feel knocked off course and feel that imposter syndrome if they hit a task that they find difficult. Why am I finding this so difficult? I'm usually so good at these kind of things. And it's interesting, we kind of looking at conditions of worth there, or maybe introjected values as we're going through this and watching how the parallels play out here. And then finally, in these persona types, we have the superhero, high achieving, competitive, I guess the term workaholic, always giving everything, able to get huge amounts of work done. But that leads perhaps to burnout or being in a position where you don't have anything left in the tank to give. And then we settle into the imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm not good enough. I should be doing what I was doing. How come I can't do it now? So there's just some flavor of what might kind of lead to that feeling of imposter syndrome, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it leads to vicious cycles. It's a secular kind of feeling that people go through. And, we criticize our performance. And then when we criticize our performance, we feel less able to do it. And then we criticize that, and it goes round and round and round in circles. And hopefully a good tutor would pick that up if you're in class and maybe take you to one side and say, what's going on here? And have a bit of a chat about it. And maybe, in some cases, just reassure someone and say, look, try to be a bit kinder to yourself. Try just to, be in the moment, work with the client or the person who's speaking, the speaker. It's sometimes if it's class based, and be just a little bit kinder to yourself. And I also think it speaks to something else, especially in counselling. It's so unusual in the society we have for people to be, those three conditions of empathic, congruent, and give unconditional positive regard. Have a think about how often outside therapy, or your work in the classroom, how often do you come across that in life? And I would suggest very, very seldom. Our society really isn't kind of programmed for that, and it can feel very, very odd being that way of being. Developing that way of being can feel very, very odd, because what we have to do is we have to lean into it. We have to lean into those conditions. We have to make ourselves vulnerable when we offer them. And I think for some, that can be really, really tricky, Ken.
Yes, very much so. You're speaking about the three conditions there. And of course, there are six if we look at the wider theory. And Rogers himself says that the six conditions are necessary. They need to be there and sufficient. Now, we're just speaking about the person-centered model here, but I cannot tell you, Rory, how freeing that was when I went in as a student in placement, working with my supervisor at the time, and feeling a really high level of imposter syndrome, of needing to be there and guide these clients through the troubles that they're facing into the light, as if it was my personal kind of responsibility to do that. And of course, looking to the theory, and I remember the session so well, where my supervisor pointed to the theory and said, "Are you exercising these conditions?" "Yes, I am." "The theory says it's necessary. You're doing them?" "Yes, I am." It also says they're sufficient. It is not your job. It is your job to be there, to hear, to listen, to empathically go with, not to get them there. And that really helped dissolve that imposter syndrome. Because the imposter syndrome for me is very much linked to an external locus of evaluation. And we've certainly covered that on previous podcast topics, but an external locus of evaluation is, what are they going to think of me? When are they going to find out that I'm really just faking this? They're going to see through the ruse. It's about being found out. It's external to self. There's an incongruence in that, and often that incongruence can show itself as your work being of good enough quality and nobody saying anything, but inside you feel, any minute now I'm going to get caught out. And that's kind of a common feeling in imposter syndrome. And of course, it can have an impact, and it can have a really negative impact for us. But it can also, we can maybe see this in our clients as we're going through the arc of therapy. It can lead to somebody downgrading their career choice, wanting to look for a place where they might feel more comfortable because of the discomfort that comes with imposter syndrome. It can keep you awake at night, the imposter syndrome. So downgrading those career choices, and I've even spoken with people who have left a job that they were doing well in because they felt any minute now it's going to come crashing down like a house of cards. And it was less painful to just go away from that for that person. It can also lead to people going in with a negative kind of view on what it is they're doing, expecting to do badly, putting out that intention of negativity going in, I'm not very good at that. I'm not going to do too well of this. So it kind of changes the person's attitude as they might come in to a task. And it can even stop somebody from doing a task or doing something that they might feel passionate about. You know, they may have a project and want to do it and be all excited about it, but when they sit down to do it, they feel the imposter syndrome comes in. Who am I to do this? Who am I to write this book or whatever it may be, that project? And it can actually stop that from materializing and really hold that person hostage. And of course, it can lead to people adjusting their behaviors, how they show up in their day-to-day life, almost playing a part like an actor in their own lives because they think that that would look more competent, more professional, and other people might see them in a better light if they do so. And all of these can so easily be linked back to that feeling of imposter syndrome, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some further research on this, and I'm quoting Cuddy, and Cuddy goes on to say, if we all knew how many of us felt like imposters, we'd have to conclude either we're all imposters and none of us know what we're doing, or our self-assessments are way off. Thus, it's important to encourage people with imposter syndrome not to judge themselves on having those feelings. And I guess if it becomes, I will use the word crippling imposter syndrome, therapy can help. I mean, it's suggesting maybe that CBT may be the way to go, where CBT usually challenges specific types of thinking, and to give people to look at different options in the way they think. That can be the way to go and can be quite helpful. Coaching can be quite helpful, where I've had coaching where I've spoken about things that are holding me back, and people have said, well, let's just stop there. Let's just check if that is true. It's what we would do when we were teaching. Let's just check if that is true. Where is the evidence that you're not good at this? Who's told you this? Well, nobody. Well, where's this coming from? And sometimes just putting a new kind of thinking map on the road is a really good idea. And also, I think one of the things that certainly I think is really helpful is to reframe anxiety as excitement. I think that is really, really useful. I do this with my granddaughter all the time. If she says, "Oh, I'm feeling anxious," I said, "Well, when you feel excited, is it?" And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "So is it the same?" And she kind of thinks of it. She goes, "Yeah." I said, "So could it be you're excited, not anxious?" Yep. And I think that's really, really useful, because the emotion of anxiety and excitement are actually the same thing. If you think about when you've been excited and that kind of butterflies in your tummy, and maybe you feel yourself a little bit wired, and then you feel anxiety, they're usually one or two of the same things. And I think the biggest thing is to embrace failure. We're all going to fail at something at some point in our lives, and look at it as an opportunity for growth. Recently, I went to see a Noel Gallagher concert. He was playing his guitar and he forgot the chords, and he's playing his guitar and he went completely off, and he just started laughing at himself. He was like, he'd played it 100,000 times before. He just laughed at himself, and everybody else thought it was really funny as he was struggling to play one of his greatest songs. So it happens even to the best, and also just be thoughtful for yourself. Don't set unrealistic targets. Make small changes in what you do. Don't look for massive changes. Just do it a little bite at a time. As we always say on the podcast, Ken, the way to eat an elephant, if people eat elephants, and no letters, please, in the postbag, is a bite at a time. What do you think, Ken?
Well, I'm a vegetarian, so I'm going to put that fork down. But you're 100% right. Of course, it's setting unrealistic goals puts you in a position where you're going to be in a place where you feel, I'm not going to reach this. And that can set in that imposter syndrome. For me, one of the greatest imposter syndrome fighters is really taking time to celebrate your own wins and accomplishments. I'll give an example of this. Maybe you go and you say, I want to train to become a counsellor, and you start off in level 2. And you're all excited, and you go into level 2, and then you graduate level 2. You get your certificate for level 2, and you're going to be moving on to level 3. And is that viewed of, wow, I did it. This is incredible. I've accomplished this goal. Or is that just put one side and it's right, okay, that's finished now. Now I've got to get through level 3. So not taking the time to focus on the accomplishments and wins within our lives, however small they be. You can look at your day and say, what am I proud of myself for today? What did I accomplish today? And celebrate that little win. Because by celebrating those little wins, we're positively reinforcing all the time that we are making progress, that we are benefiting others, that we are, I guess, traveling that road that is successful. And then I guess to balance that off, so often we can measure who we are, what we do, and the success thereof by looking at others. By looking at others and judge and looking at them on their pedestal or the position that they may be in, and saying, if I measure myself against them, I'm not where I want to be. Well, the truth is, you are where you are, and the only person that we need to measure ourselves against is ourselves. Am I a better version of myself today than I was before I started my counselling practice? Well, I have to say, yes, I am. So there is progress there. There is a win there. And these are ways, I guess, and some of the others that you've mentioned there, Rory, of kind of dealing with imposter syndrome, looking to our wins. And of course, transferable into therapy as well. If we're working with a client, we may see this imposter syndrome. What does it look like? Well, we've kind of described what it is, kind of some of the symptoms or the kind of personality types that may be more susceptible to imposter syndrome. And we've shared some of the ways that can be combated. And this has all been beautifully put together for you in a free, super duper Rory's handout. And we need a sound effect for the super duper handout, Rory. You can get this by going to counsellingtutor.com. That's our website. And just click on the podcast tab. Find episode 280. That's 280. And right there on that page, right at the top, is a little link that says download the handout. Click on that and it will download the handout for you, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome. It's really nice. It's 5 different pages with loads of references. So if you're using any of this within an assignment, the actual references are there for you. And I guess, Rory, that brings us to the end of our Student Services for today. Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Have you ever wondered if you're using counselling skills effectively? Confidentiality means we rarely see skills used by others, so it's no wonder that so many students say they lack confidence in their counselling skills. That's why I built Counselling Skills Academy. Counselling Skills Academy is an online course that you can do at your own pace. It will give you the skills competence and confidence to know that you're using your skills most effectively. You will see real counselling skills used by a counsellor in real life sessions, covering everything from how risk is assessed right through to working towards an appropriate ending. Visit counsellingskillsacademy.com to learn more and to claim your counselling tutor discount. That's counsellingskillsacademy.com. And as we go out of student services, we find ourselves entering the wonderful world of that ethical, sustainable practice. And there's 2 words there that are so important. So the focus, first of all, is on the person who goes into private practice, either starting or leveraging or growing your private practice. That's 2 words, ethical and sustainable. They're both so important. We need to act ethically in the way that we interact and the way that we run our business. And sustainability is the side that keeps us being able, I guess, pays the bills and keeps us being able to do what it is that we're doing. And today, I think we're focusing on an ethical side, and it's an important side, and it's an unseen side. And I guess I'd like to start this conversation by saying, can you imagine if there was a listening device in your counselling room and someone who you have no knowledge of may have an ear, be listening to your sessions, hearing what your clients say, maybe from a different country, and that they may be collecting that data and using it to sell to you or to influence how you may behave? That sounds really frightening. That sounds like something out of 1984 book. But it could be happening, Rory.
Yes, it could be. And it's really interesting. We're incredibly grateful. I know we mention our Facebook page in every episode, but really, 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 people on our Facebook page do provide inspiration for a lot of the topics that we have in the podcast. And if you want to go to our Facebook page, Facebook Counselling Tutor, and you're in. But someone spoke about going to a therapist and talking about what was going on for them. And all of a sudden, this disconnected voice started speaking. And when asked what this was, the therapist said, "Oh, don't worry, it's my Alexia." And an Alexia, for those who don't know, is a voice-operated gadget that you can plug into your internet, and you can say, "Alexia, switch my lights on." I'm sure people with Alexias, the lights will be flashing on and off now, won't they? People are listening to this. And there's quite a few others. I mean, Google do one. There's quite a few others. Voice operated technology. And when challenged, the therapist said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's just the Alexa," and carried on. And it was very, very disconcerting. And I think sometimes we forget that even the humble mobile phone can be a very frightening prospect for clients. Phones, I mean, I use my phone all the time for all sorts of things, but we have to remember we may have had clients who have been subject to forms of abuse using phones. I won't go any further into that. Or people who may have had it been listened into using phones. I know that there's people who have had technology put on their phones to track them. And to have a phone in the therapy room or any form of technology can be quite scary. And I don't want to wear a tinfoil hat here, although I fear I may be going into tinfoil hat territory. But recently in the summer, my wife and myself were out in the car, and we mentioned Christmas trees. Now, bearing in mind, it was so hot that the tarmac was literally blistering on the floor. And when I picked my phone up, it noticed that all the advertising was for Christmas trees.
Yep.
And it could have been a coincidence. It could have been just that they're advertising Christmas trees in June. Or it could have been that my phone listened in and decided to match up some advertising to what it had heard. So I think devices, any form of devices, can present a third person in the room. And there are some people who may very well believe that your device is listening and that there is someone at the other end. It's not for us to criticize them and say, well, I think, you've got a bit of a conspiracy theory going on. When I practiced, I always made a bit of a show of holding my phone up and saying, right, I'm going to turn my phone off and I'm putting it in this drawer. And it was a bit of a theatrical wave of my phone, I have to say. And in the drawer it went and the drawer was shut. And it was a signal to say that there are only two people in the room now, me and thee. And me and thee are the only people who are going to be talking. I'm going to be listening. You're going to be talking about your issues. So be thoughtful of technology. Technology is very wonderful and certainly makes my life a lot easier. But I think that we need to be very thoughtful how others, that's the client, view technology and the impact it's had on them in the past.
Yeah. So in preparation for this topic, I did a deep dive and I was looking on YouTube and I put in to YouTube, is my phone listening to me? And then I had a look and there's loads of videos on YouTube. I found it really interesting. Like you say, Rory, I could feel myself edging towards the tinfoil and folding it into a hat shaped because there's some really interesting stories, but there are also some case studies where they do case studies showing. So two people will sit and they will have a chat about random topics. So in this example that I looked at, they were speaking about cruises and Disneyland. And then they actually show how, when they then go onto social media, those adverts are there starting to show to them Disneyland ads and cruise ads from the conversation. Now, is that as a result of the phone listening? I don't know. I can't say. And what I can say is that the tech companies state categorically that they do not listen in. That comes from Facebook, that comes from Google, that comes from Apple. I've looked, they say we're not listening. But wow, that is one massive coincidence that you could talk about Christmas trees in the middle of summer and see an advert for them, that you can speak about a topic at random and then see adverts. How is that happening? And I don't know. And I don't want to go down the conspiracy route. I want to go down the what we can do. When we don't know, what we can do is control the controllables. Is my phone listening? I don't know. But I'm certainly not going to have it in my room when I'm working with a client. Or if it is in my room, it's going to be turned off. Is my smart speaker listening to all of my conversations? I don't know. But I'm not going to have a smart speaker that might be listening within my room when I'm working with a client. And of course, we do an online and telephone training course, a certificate in online and working online and on telephone. And we cover this in depth, of taking the tech out of the room. Because even if it is not listening, even if it is that just it is triggered by a word in the background when a client is there, it can leave that client feeling that perhaps it was listening, and we don't know what their views on this are, Rory, you know. And certainly in the comment that you're speaking about that was on our Facebook page, that was a student of counselling who went for their own personal counselling. The voice came from the smart speaker and they felt shook up, you know, and we might not hear if a client feels shook up because they don't have the voice to maybe voice that. They might not have the voice or be able to have the courage to say that to the therapist. So it's really interesting having that glimpse from someone that is studying counselling and how it made them feel. And it led me to think how I would feel. And certainly, you know, I've got to the point now where if I'm going to be talking about something that is really, really personal with my family, it's the same thing. We take the phones and the devices out of the room because, well, it's controlling the controllables, I guess.
Absolutely, and I can give you one example of something that happened to me. I was out with Mrs. Counselling Tutor, having a tea in a tea room, and we were having a bit of a chat about something. And I turned my phone over, and I'd sent a friend a text, and the phone had listened into the conversation and then composed a new text for me. Now, it was a bit gobbledygook, I have to say. It wasn't a verbatim transcript of what we were talking about, but it goes to prove that if you're not sharp and understand how technology works, I could have just clicked that and sent that gobbledygook message to my friend. It could have been more precise. It could have had a more accurate reproduction of what me and my wife were talking about, probably Garibaldi biscuits or something like that. But the point I'm coming to is that it was listening and it did send them. And also a bit of a plea, and I'm sure a lot of counselling lecturers would agree with me. If you're a student and you're recording your skills, don't use your phone. Don't use your phone because it gets stored. And also, it's very easy with the 2-click send anything technology we have now to send, you know, can you imagine you're clicking away and you think, I'll just send this. You click the wrong file and you send a sound file of your skills lesson to a friend. Totally scary. You know, just invest a few pounds in buying a recorder, and then you can always sell it at the end of your course, and you probably get your money back. You know, couldn't guarantee that, but you probably will, because, you know, they're quite in demand, certainly for counselling students. So I think we have to be the masters of technology, not their servants, and we have to be very thoughtful of how we use it, Ken.
Yeah, and you know, we may think, well, I've got an Apple phone and I pretty much trust Apple and I think that Apple would not listen in. Well, that's all good and well, but I wonder how many apps you have on your phone and how many of those apps within the terms and conditions that we agree to, often without reading them because they're pages and pages long in the tiniest of tiny text, how many of them have access to our microphone? Because when you're agreeing to those terms and conditions, you're giving access to certain parts of your device. And I know from a recent documentary I was watching in China that there are certain apps that are really taking over and collecting personal data and using that personal data against people. And the thing is, it's not against the law because they've been given permission. They've been given permission in the terms and conditions. The person has said, yes, do that. I would like to hope that those kind of apps don't appear in our app store. But we need to be vigilant. Specifically, we're looking out for our clients. So what kind of apps are you using? Are you looking at the terms and conditions and what accesses those apps have on your devices if you're working online, for instance? And then secondly, the other side of this is that technology can always be used in abusive ways. So if we think about hackers, that's their modus operandi, is that they will use technology in abusive ways to exploit and hurt for their own personal gain. But we can take that same scenario and put it just hypothetically with an abusive partner who may be able to use something just as simple as a mobile phone. Within a mobile phone, there is an accessibility section within the settings. And within the accessibility section, there is a section, certainly on Apple devices, for hard of hearing individuals. It's there for a good purpose. And what it allows the phone to do is almost act as an amplifier. So what the hearing impaired person can do is pop in some headphones, some iPods, and have the phone can be placed near to the people who are speaking, and they will hear what they're talking about in their headphones. Now, I've played around with those accessibility settings, and the thing that scared me the most is I can put my phone in a completely different room, lying on a table. I can go out of that room with my little earpods in, and I can hear what is being spoken about in that room. Now, here's the kicker, Rory. Even if they are whispering, and even if they are not sitting close to the phone, it blew me away how effective this listening device is. It can hear a whisper from another side of a room. My rooms are not very big. I live in a small cottage, but still. So thinking of I guess it's a different topic, but it's just looking at that technology can be used in that way. There's never been a time where we need to be more vigilant about a third person listening in a room.
Absolutely. And all you have to do is take some basic precautions.
Yeah.
If you have a, smart home system, good on you. I've got friends who've got me, brilliant, turn the lights on, Alexa. Sorry if everybody felt lights gone on at home. But unplug it, unplug it. And if you have a mobile phone, pop it in a drawer, show them that, you say, I'm turning off my phone and I'm putting it in the drawer. Because even just that can be so reassuring. Remember, clients may not tell you. Almost certainly clients won't tell you. They'll just sit worrying about looking at your phone, and then they might not come back, So just make a point of it. You can even put it in your contract. I'd lock my phone in a drawer when I'm with clients and it's turned off.
Yeah.
And that could be so reassuring. There are lots of technology now that, although they're very handy, can be used in abusive ways. And maybe we'll cover that on a different podcast, or maybe we'll interview someone who's an expert on that. But be vigilant and just take some simple precautions.
There's 3 parts to CPD, continuing professional development. The first part is listening to or watching or ingesting the information, might be reading something. The second part is then reflecting and having a think and saying, how does that apply to me? How does that apply to my practice? How does that apply to my clients? And then the third part, and I think that the circle is only complete with this third part of what makes CPD so effective. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do? Or what am I not going to do? And I guess the takeaway here is, what are you going to do? You've heard this. Are you going to have some time and reflect on that and think about it? And then you're going to put a policy in place. You're going to write something down of how you might work or not, depending on what your takeaway is from this. But I think it's an important topic. It becomes more and more important as we just enter this world that it just becomes more technology rich, technologies that are more difficult to understand. I think it's an important topic. Have a think, see what you're going to do, and that is our ethical, sustainable practice. And of course, practice matters, Rory. Also about CPD, and you reached out once again, spoke to an expert in the field of transactional analysis. You spoke with Lisa on games in
Absolutely.
TA.
Transactional analysis is a well-respected and deep psychological set of theories. It's a huge canon of information within transactional analysis. And one of those is a very early idea by Eric Byrne, the founder of transactional analysis, called games. I caught up with Lisa Mathurin, who's done a fantastic lecture for the CSR library. And this is what she had to say on games.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice, that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee. Visit counsellingtutor.com.
Many years ago, I read a book, long before I was a therapist, called Games People Play by Eric Byrne. I found it a fascinating read as a then layperson. So I'm really delighted to welcome back Lisa Mathurin, who has done a number of lectures on TA and TA theory. And Lisa's just done for the CSR Library a lecture on games. So Lisa Mathurin, welcome back.
Thank you, Rory. Lovely to see you again.
So games, just what in terms of TA theory, what are games?
Well, a game is an unconscious process that happens between two people that is really a way of getting our needs met. And you will know that you're in a game because at the end of the interaction, there's normally a negative payoff or you're left feeling bad. So I don't know if at any point in your life you've ever thought to yourself, why am I here again? Or why does this keep happening to me? And which probably means you're replaying out some kind of psychological game.
Yes, and it's kind of sometimes it can be a very simple thing like one-upmanship. I'm sorry about the pronoun there, but one person upship. Don't know how you'd say that now in the modern world, but I remember when I was a sales guy. I had a company car many years ago when people had company cars, and there used to be a huge amount of competition about who's got the best racing stripes or the best alloy wheels. And he'd say, I've got this new car, so we'd say, has he got these alloy wheels? Has he got this X pack? And you were left thinking, I haven't got that, so I'm not as good as that person. That's the type of game, isn't it, that can be played out? Yeah, gotcha.
Exactly, yeah. And what they do is there's two outcomes to games. It's either the person is trying to correct a childhood experience, so to get a different outcome, or they're trying to reinforce a script belief. And if you look back through the library, there's lectures on scripts and that. So there's more information there. But normally we hold script beliefs about ourselves. So in that example you've just given, you may have a script belief of, I'm never going to be successful, or I'm not as good as other people. So interpreting that in that way, you've reinforced that belief. Yeah, and you'd look for every opportunity to reinforce it. Exactly. So someone might say, well, in the case of the car, so what? I've not got a car with, alloy wheels on, so be it, not be really bothered. But for someone, it can be, that's a sense of failure. I've not done enough. And yes, I think it's very interesting. Of course, just to remind us, scripts are kind of, they're literally like an actor's script written in childhood that we live out. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And the behaviours from our script are to get the needs met, whether they're healthy or unhealthy. It's still the child's best effort to get that need met. Yes. So in terms of scripts, how in terms of games, how might we see them played out maybe in the therapy room when a client presents? Yeah, well, the one I experience most of all out of all of the games, and if you look at the lecture that I did for you, there is a link to a list of all of the names of games. So, and there's lots of them. The one that I come across more than any other is the "Why don't you yes but" game. So it's shortened to know the yes but. And most people can recognise that one. When someone comes to you and says, I really don't know what to do about this, and you offer your support by saying, have you thought about this or thought about that? And they'll go, yeah, but, and give a reason why they can't do that. So you give another idea and it's yes, but, and clients do this all the time. And there's lots of reasons for that. One of the reasons is to kind of remain in that stuck position, although really they don't want to. It's a familiar place for them. Yes. And moving out of the stuckness can be really scary because it means embracing change, and that can be really scary for some people. And and for the therapist, it can be really frustrating because, every time you kind of offer to support or facilitate, you're getting back resistance and negativity. So that's one that can be really frustrating. You can end up, the client can go away thinking this is hopeless, no one can help me, and the therapist can end up feeling incompetent because they're getting the resistance and the negativity. And the other game that quite often presents in the therapy room is called Kick Me. And what happens is the client might be taking up kind of a persecutory position, and the counsellor, for sake of holding the relationship, kind of just takes that, if you like, and then unconsciously they might come in with an intervention which is kind of a little bit maybe too direct or something, just to kind of get back at the client. And none of this is deliberate, it's all unconscious. But it's a way of kicking back. So it's a psychological kick, obviously. As I say, it might be a robust confrontation or a way of kind of unconsciously playing out the frustrations with the client, really.
Yes. I remember when I did my TA 101 many years ago, the introduction to TA, the therapist that taught me, she was saying that she had a client who came in who played himself. He was a very successful man. He used to fly in for his therapy sessions, so you can gauge the amount of success this guy had. But he would present as a little boy in the therapy room and trying, and almost like, I'm in trouble again. And one day she just said, enough. Stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would be a game. He is playing a little boy, and he obviously wanted some kind of response from the therapist, and the therapist kind of put a challenge in and said, enough. We're not doing that today.
Yeah. And also, I mean, Byrne talked about degrees of games. So he came up with kind of 3 levels, if you like. He called them the degrees of destructiveness related to games. And the first degree, it is where you have an interaction with someone and there's a moment of confusion and you think, how did this happen, or how did I get here? But it's something that you would share in your social circle. So that's kind of first degree. You talk to people about it. A second degree game normally involves something that's kind of embarrassing or shameworthy. And it's not the kind of thing you would make public. You'd only share that with people that you're quite intimate with. And then he talked about a third degree game, which is life changing. And he's, a direct quote from him is, it's played for keeps and it ends in surgery, courtroom or the morgue, which is quite scary. But real kind of they're very rare, obviously, but that kind of shows the degree of game playing from something that's surface level right through to something that's much more serious.
They're patterns of behaviour, aren't they?
Exactly.
And for those of us who've worked in offender services or drug and alcohol, we would see those games played out by people who may be just entering recovery. I've certainly had that on quite a few occasions, and in fact the third degree game I've come across on a number of occasions where people have done themselves serious harm or been returned back to prison. And you're right. I think that a lot of it is subconscious, and I think that as just to bring a little bit of Rogers in here, all behaviour is goal directed. It's towards a goal which may or may not be beneficial to the client.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's really useful when looking at games and analysing games is using Cartman's drama triangle, and your listeners may be aware of the drama triangle because it's used in lots of different theories. But it was devised to support the analysis of games with the 3 positions, so the persecutor, rescuer, and victim. So sometimes if you're in a game or you think you've played a game, it might be worth connecting to your behaviour and feelings. What role did you play?
Yeah.
And in a game, there's normally a switch. So for the yes, but game, the client might start off in a very victim position, yes, but I can't, poor me. And then when the therapist becomes frustrated, the client can turn persecutory. So there's normally a switch, which means a role change.
Yes.
So someone can start off very victimy and then end up persecutory, or
yes,
and then the other person's left wondering what's going on.
Yes, I mean, I could give you an example of that. One of my students many years ago was working with a client who was having difficulties with relationships, and it presented with, my relationships never work out, they always fail. I give everything to the women I see, but it's never enough, and on and on and on and on. And as the therapy the arc of therapy took course, in one session, the client said to the counsellor, "I've been failed by women all the time, women like you." And there's the switch.
Yeah. So from a poor me victimy place, switch to persecutory. Yeah. So that's definitely some form of game going on there. Yeah. That's a really good example.
Yeah. And of course, I think we should say that in analysis, let me ask you the question: what is the role of the therapist in looking at games? Is it to analyze and bring the game to the client's attention?
Yeah, it's a really good way of working out what the motivation for the game is, because then you can isolate the need or isolate the deficit, if you like, and work out what the client needs to do for themselves to meet that deficit, or what you can support the client with. So analysing games is a really good way to look at behaviours and motivations of how we interact with others and what we actually need from them, because they're all ulterior, so that it's kind of underground behaviours or underground psychological needs. So it kind of helps with self-analysis as well.
Yeah, so ask yourself the question when someone says, "Have you ever thought of doing this?" and you go, "Yes, but what's going on for you? Is that a discomfort that you're not willing to move on and stretch yourself, or go into a comfortable place where new learning or maybe an uncomfortable conversations needed?" Yeah.
So really, are you looking to reinforce a negative belief about yourself, or are you looking to get a different outcome?
Yes.
If you've always been, say you were missed a lot in childhood, are you looking to be seen?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I could identify, I'll share one from my history. I had a lot of trouble at school learning anything because I'm dyslexic. And I found myself, certainly as a younger man, certainly before I became a therapist, using that as an excuse for inaction. Well, I can't do that because I'm dyslexic, can't do that, dyslexic. And it was only to the point where I actually got fed up of hearing myself say it.
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm sure there must be other people in the same boat as me. I put a new script on the road. I said, yeah, well, probably it's going to be a bit harder for me to train on other people I'd study, but other people with dyslexia have done it, so why not me?
Yeah. Well done.
Yeah.
So you had a different outcome. You changed your script belief. Yeah,
changed script belief.
Yeah, well done.
But it was a long-lived series of, not to put too fine a point on it, excuses.
Yeah.
Just excuses to manage that. And I've no need to do that now. I didn't mention it because, I think other people are in the same boat maybe. And, I think it's good to say, well, I'm dyslexic, but this is what I've done to overcome it. But it is quite interesting and it does play out. I find games really fascinating because once you understand them, you just see them play out not only in the therapy room,
you do,
but in our own life.
Oh, yeah. And people have favourite games. You might know someone who always comes from that victim-y, yes, but place, or people, again, a game that starts in the victim role is poor me.
It's awful.
Me.
Yeah, poor me.
It always happens to me. Life's not fair.
Yeah.
And that's all the start of a game. So to stop playing the game, people would say, well, just step off the drama triangle. Don't take an invitation for one of the roles. Refuse to play.
Yeah.
However, what that does is, if we withdraw, then we move out of psychological contact with the other person, and that impacts the relationship. So that's when, in 1990, A.C. Choi came up with the winner's triangle, and kind of took Cartman's original roles and turned them into kind of a more supportive, positive way. So instead of persecutory, you can be assertive. Instead of being rescuey, and rescue the person, you can come over as being caring or facilitative.
Yes.
And instead of being victimy, which has kind of a negative connotation, you can share vulnerability.
Yes.
So you can still be in psychological contact with the person, but you change the role that you take.
Yeah, and I guess the language, because when you're in those Cartman positions, the language is very, very different. Maybe to the winner's triangle, where you're using different vocabulary to facilitate that. I think that's really important, because the traditional, what I've read, a traditional way of kind of deflating the drama triangle is to step out of it. All the training I ever had was step out, just don't get into it, step out of it. But you're absolutely right. Once you step out of it, you step out of the relationship as well. Yes. That's the danger.
Yeah. And then that can kick off a whole new lot of games because you've then withdrawn and the person will have to play to get you back. And so by, as you say, changing the language, taking on Choi's roles, of being assertive or caring or vulnerable, you can stay in psychological contact with the other without reinforcing their game playing.
Yeah, or getting involved in any transferential activities where they may see you as a person, a different relationship from the past, a person from the past.
Yeah.
I have to say that I always enjoy speaking with you, Lisa. I always come away learning something new every day. And the games lecture is one of a number of lectures on TA.
Yes.
Written and delivered by you, a TA therapist, soon to complete your masters in TA. So I wonder, as we come to the end of the interview, what do you hope that people may take away from this lecture?
I would hope that this has kind of increased people's awareness so that when they are left feeling confused or with a negative result from an interaction with someone, they can think of game theory, think of the drama triangle, and can kind of analyze the interactions to learn more about their own behavior and how they have interacted with that person, and maybe swap from being on the drama triangle to the winner's triangle and get a positive outcome and increase the interaction and the relationship with either the other or the client, or rather than being it's such a negative, hopeless feeling when you come out of a game. It feels quite disempowering. So maybe in one word, I hope people feel empowered by the lecture.
Well, on that hopeful note, Lisa Mathurin, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you to Lisa Mathurin. A big thank you to you, Rory. You're always reaching out, bringing in the right people with the right topics. This is the Counselling Tutor Podcast. You've been listening to episode 280.
Yes, we started off in student services is overcoming imposter syndrome. Ken and myself discuss ways of overcoming imposter syndrome and indeed disclose that we both at times feel like imposters. So you're not on your own, but there are ways of getting around a bit and being a little bit thoughtful to yourself. In ethical sustainable practice, we talked about the third person in the room. We put our tinfoil hats on for a little while and talked about technology and how it may impact on the client therapist relationship and gave some useful observations, I hope, onto how we may be able to alleviate and ameliorate clients' anxieties regarding technology you might have in your house, or even just where you put your phone. And then finally, we caught up with Lisa Mathurin in Practice Matters, and she talks about games people play. Very famous theory by Eric Byrne. If you've enjoyed this podcast, why not give us a 5-star review on the platform that you're listening to this podcast on? And please, if you want to help out and share, we want our podcast in as many ears as possible. So why don't you share it across on your socials so other people can hear the information that we give out? And as always, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.